recently I finished preparations on a brand new D&D campaign with brand new players. This is a big deal for me. I haven't started a brand new full-length D&D campaign in a long time. Now, we have plans to just make this a mini campaign for now, but hey, who knows? It might expand into something more. You'll be sure to see that very soon. But anyway, look, point is that I have learned a lot about campaign prep, game prep, world building in the 4 years or so that I have been DMing, and my process has changed a lot. I have learned from the mistakes of my past, and I like to think I've gotten a little bit better at my world building and campaign prep than I was when I first started out. And I want to go over those lessons. There are some stark differences to how I world built and how I prepped 4 years ago to how I just finished prepping this first session today. So today, we are going to be talking about those differences. We're going to be talking about those lessons learned and how you can use those lessons in your own D&D game. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, like many people, I started playing D&D before I was a DM. I did like loose one-shots and stuff like that, and from those one-shots, I learned the lesson that you should start small. You want to focus on the moment-to-moment adventure before you do the big picture stuff, and I still think that that is a really good lesson. However, I have now added a little amendment to that when I'm prepping my games. I start out with the broad strokes, the big picture ideas, just a few bullet points to give me a vibe of what the hell I'm writing. When I first started my first full-length homebrew campaign, I started very, very small. I just started with the city, the town, really, the tiny little town that they were adventuring in, the surrounding culture, the surrounding monsters, the surrounding denizens, all that sort of stuff. That was good, that was great, but I was kind of aimless. I had extremely loose ideas of where I was going to take this campaign, and frankly, when I was preparing those small details, I didn't know what they were all leading to. Sure, it might have turned out okay, but I quickly pivoted to something else, and I've done this ever since, writing down some just broad stroke ideas of what the hell I want to do with this campaign. The campaign I'm prepping now, I wrote down the broad stroke ideas of this. It's gothic, it's mafia inspired, think The Irishman, The Godfather. It takes place in a setting akin to Critical Role Campaign 3, where we have firearms, but there's still a lot of magic. It is still very much a medieval fantasy setting with a little bit of technological advancement, and that's about it. Those are 3 broad points that help me to guide the narrative of what I'm going to be doing in this campaign. And from there, I did more broad points. Okay, that's the world that we're playing in. That's the area that we're playing in. What's the conflict? Well, I want to do like a monster in the streets conflict. Okay, so an urban campaign. From there, now I can prep the small details of what we're doing. It's an urban campaign, so I need shopkeepers. I need dock workers, stuff like that. Those could be NPCs that the players meet. Now I know what I'm doing for this campaign, and furthermore, I know what to pitch for my players. I sent out a campaign pitch to them so they knew, like, you know, what they were getting into, what they were making their characters for, etc., etc. And yeah, having these broad strokes really helped to pitch the idea of the campaign. It's a lot like painting. I can't believe I'm about to do this, but if you are unaware, I paint. I paint occasionally. Here is a painting that I did 2 days ago, and I think it turned out okay. I can't actually see it right now. I don't have my glasses, and the flip camera is really far away. But anyway, look, I hope it looks all right on that camera. But look, point is, when I'm painting like that, I have a broad idea of what I'm going to do with the painting before I start. I mix the colors, put them in their little cups, and then get them ready. I have the technique in my head. I know what I'm going to do before I get into the finer details of pouring the paint and shaking it out to see how the painting turns out. That is very akin to how I world build now. I need those broad ideas to lead me down the path of my world building. Now, it's really important that you don't get carried away. This is why a lot of people say that you need to start small, because when you get carried away with the big picture ideas, you kind of lose that moment-to-moment gameplay that your players are going to be mostly focused on. This was another mistake that I made in my first campaign, where I was focused on the big picture stuff like god pantheons and ancient history that really my players didn't need. I did not need to write down multiple pages of lore for gods and ancient history. I just needed like general information about that stuff to satisfy my players. Focusing on that was a bad idea. Sure, I needed to write those things down probably eventually, But was it urgent? No. What was urgent was the moment-to-moment gameplay, and that wasn't ready. That was my major mistake. My priorities were all out of whack. You need to prioritize the right things when you are world building, when you are preparing your campaign. Having those big, broad stroke ideas, I think that can help. As long as you don't get carried away, they can help to guide you when you are getting your game ready for your players to adventure. Alright, we briefly mentioned earlier, knowing when to not get carried away, and this is all about that. Essentially, we all know, as writers, that our first idea is not always our best idea, and we want to carry it on until we get to somewhere where we are satisfied. And you know what? That is great. There are many times where my first idea just didn't work out. I needed a better one, so I let it continue to simmer in my brain until I found a better one. BBEGs are the classic example of this, at least for me. I change my BBEGs all the time until I find one that I'm satisfied with, that I think my players are going to be satisfied with. Sometimes it's as simple as we're playing as Curse of Strahd, obviously the BBEG is Curse of Strahd, and sometimes it's as complicated as we are playing a homebrew campaign with many villains, and I don't know which one to pick to anoint as the big bad evil guy. And yeah, having further thought into it is a good thing. However, there are times where I absolutely overcomplicate stuff for myself, where I let the ideas in my head simmer for a little bit too long and it branches out into all this nonsensical ideas and information that just bogs down my storytelling and my world building. And it's really important for me to know when to stop in that case. This is really hard because you never know when your brain is going to suddenly find a better idea than what you already have. You never know when that piece of inspiration is going to snap into your mind and make everything even more awesome. But unfortunately, you can't have infinite time. We as DMs do have a loose time limit. We need to put these ideas into a campaign that our players are playing. And usually we're doing this session by session, week by week. So when you are prepping your games, you need to know when to let it go, when to just put the idea that you have onto your notes, onto a piece of paper, and just use it in the game. I struggled with both sides of this coin. I have an idea, it's the first draft, it's not a great draft, and now I have a flawed idea in my campaign, or I have an idea, it's been simmering in my head for months, and now it's way overcomplicated, and when I put it into the campaign, the players have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. Both are bad. You need to find that middle ground and eventually put that idea in your head onto a piece of paper and just know when to use it in the game. Don't overcomplicate it. Just make it as complicated as it needs to be for both you to have a good time and for your players to understand it. Speaking of the players, focus on their ideas. Your players are preferably giving you ideas for what they want their characters to be. It can be as simple as, I'm taking a lot of inspiration from Destiny, can you put some Destiny references in the campaign? Or it can be as complicated as, my character is a paleontologist who's studying ancient history, can you create some ancient history for me to study? That stuff is great. I like focusing on those things because for the players, that is a major highlight of Dungeons & Dragons. A lot of people play this game to fulfill a story that they helped to create. It is the DM who's prepping this game who is the storyteller, but the players are also storytellers. They're also giving you their backstories. They're the ones playing the characters. They are the main characters of the story, and they have agency to craft it in their own image, so to speak. So, when a player gives you a backstory and you think that there are hooks there that you could use in the campaign, use them. We say this all the time on D&D YouTube. I know it's been said 1,000 times, but so often I see DMs who don't know where to go, who feel like they're stuck. They're on DM Academy asking for ideas, when I'm just confused as to why they're asking random DMs on the internet for ideas. Sure, we could give some half-decent ones, but why don't you ask your players? Your players could give you some damn good ideas just from the backstories that they give you or the character concepts that they hand to you. I mean, seriously, I jokingly mentioned that Destiny-inspired player, but that is a player in my actual D&D campaign that I'm running right now, and even though his character is really simple, and even though his desire for simple references is, again, simple, even simple stuff can give you a lot for your campaign. Don't underestimate it. And hell, if a player gives you a lot of ideas, like a huge complex backstory, that's a treasure trove of stuff that you can use in the future, that you can use to spice up your campaign. And on top of that, players love it when you do this. And on top of all that, players simply love it when you do this. There's no reason not to include at least a little bit of their ideas. Alright, we just talked about players a lot, but one big tip I definitely don't see enough DMs using is just let the players help you out with world building. Look, let's be honest, world building takes a long time. It is hard at points, and sometimes you can get stuck really easily, especially at the very beginning, but there's no reason why players can't submit a first draft to you if they have an idea for their hometown or an NPC in their backstory. Having the players help you out with that is a big deal. Often, players will submit me rough concepts, and then I will flesh them out. I'll write the hometown, I'll write the NPCs in their backstory, but I'm starting to realize that that is not always the best approach. Sometimes players are perfectly happy to participate, in a sense, to be part of the world building, to be part of the storytelling, and to directly write the story for their characters. Well, write the backstory for their characters. Obviously, the story of the game is going to play out in the game, and the dice rolls and circumstance will determine how that goes. But there's nothing wrong, I think, with players submitting you a draft and having you look over it. It's much easier than writing it all on your own, to say the least. I just did this with this brand new campaign. A player approached me with a backstory and an idea for a hometown that I didn't really have in this homebrew world. I looked at a blank space in the map and told him that he could create the hometown if he wanted to, and he absolutely did. And he created something really, really awesome, really, really different from the stuff that I had created myself. Why? Well, part of the reason is because he's a different person. In fact, that's the majority of the reason, at least to me. He obviously is going to have different ideas, different styles, different inspiration because we are different people. He is going to write something that's very unique to my world, and I love that. And on top of that, it builds a player connection. Players are naturally going to be more connected to what they write. And on top of both those things, it just helps you out. Like I said at the very beginning, it takes the load off of you when you're DMing. I really wish I used this tip earlier, and I think I'm going to be using it for the rest of my D&D career if players are interested. This is absolutely something I love. Of course, you need to retain final veto power because you are the dungeon master, but having players submit a first draft, I don't think there's any harm in that at all. Final point, and this is a big one. We just talked about imposter syndrome a couple weeks ago, last episode of this series, and I think it really carries the world building sometimes. It definitely does, at least for me. When I am DMing, when I am world building, often I will get bogged down by worry, by concern. I will overthink the quality of what I'm creating. Now, of course, being critical of yourself, at least in healthy amounts, is good. You need that in order to improve, and self-improvement is a good thing. But, like I said in the previous video about just G&D in general, when you are world building, don't overthink the quality of what you create. You don't need to be Tolkien. Of course, you want your world to be good, but it's unreasonable to expect yourself to make something perfect. There might be plot holes, there might be inconsistencies, and that's okay. You learn from that, you grow, and then you move on. I just had a rough patch in my D&D campaign where I kind of fell through my own world building, my own storytelling. My players are in a story right now that I feel isn't as engaging as what I intended. And I find myself getting sidetracked a lot and going into parts of the story that aren't nearly as interesting. And not gonna lie, it really demotivated me as a dungeon master. I was overthinking the plot. I was getting bogged down by all this stuff, and I wasn't focused on running a good game. I was losing focus both while I was prepping and while I was playing the game, while I was running the game at the table. I was actively losing focus. And you know what I did? I took a break. I took a step back to look at the world from a top-down view and to analyze what I was creating and what was making me unhappy with my game, the things that I needed to change. I quickly realized that I was overcomplicating things for myself. I quickly realized that I was overthinking the world that I had created myself. I was overthinking its quality as well. I was so concerned with making it good that I forgot that first, I need to make it fun. I need to make it fun for my players, and also I need to make it fun for me. I was losing focus while I was playing because I wasn't having any fun. I wasn't creating a world that I enjoyed running a game in, and I forgot that that is a really important part of this. It has to be fun for everyone at the table, and that includes myself. This is something that I definitely need to learn. I forget a lot of times that I am also playing this game, that I also have to have a good time. I keep on thinking that if the game is fun for the players, it will just be fun for me, automatically. And that's part of it. That is absolutely true. That's 50% of the equation. But the game also just has to lend itself to your own enjoyment as well. You need to run games that you are interested in. Like, there are settings and campaigns that I'm just not interested in running. I've never run a game in the Forgotten Realms. Not because I hate it or anything, just because it doesn't intrigue me as a setting. I like running homebrew games where I control the narrative and the flow and the style of the world, where I have writing power, so to speak. I love creating worlds. That's why I don't use pre-built ones, and that's why I do that, because I enjoy. Those are the kind of games that I enjoy as a dungeon master, and I realized that focusing on stuff that I enjoy is part of the beauty of creating a world. Don't overthink it, don't overcomplicate it, and remember that you also need to be having a good time. It's you and the players together building the story. Alright, I hope that these tips helped you. I hope these tips helped you to create a better world for your players, to run better games for your groups, and to avoid the pitfalls that I have certainly fallen into. If you guys enjoyed and found this helpful, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then you can check out our Q and Play series where I answer your questions in a rambly, unscripted format while playing some video games. And while you're there in the cards, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own tips or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment "Better World" to let me know you made it to the end of the video. That's like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.